So now let's turn and focus a bit on language access, communication, and collaboration during and following Hurricane Helene. So I'll start with Rocio again. Rocio, as a bilingual communication specialist, tell us about what types of multilingual communications you coordinated during the hurricane response, and which did you find to be the most effective?
So with communications down, as we mentioned before, it was reimagining things. It was interesting. I manage a Facebook page in Spanish, and I was having I noticed, well, once I got to the EOC, right, we had Wi-Fi, and I noticed that some people were direct messaging the county's Facebook page in Spanish, and then I was answering. But I was like, is it silly because we don't have communications? But I noticed some people were able to get in touch. So it wasn't, I guess, everybody. And then it seemed like it was coming in and out, that sometimes signal would come in and out. So I was answering messages and and then decided to do Facebook Lives. That's been one of the things that I have noticed that the Hispanic community really likes getting audiovisual information instead of written. So I was doing Facebook Lives, kind of like hopefully someone listens out there. Um, we were also, since we noticed some people may have service and may have internet, then we were also putting out information in both English and Spanish. And that was good. We started doing the pods, points of distribution, and then there we would have printed information. We had flyers in Russian, Ukrainian, and Spanish because we do have a Russian and Ukrainian population here that's highly visible. Um, we also, from the county, we had been doing press briefings since I think Thursday, the Thursday before the hurricane hit. So we did those in both English and Spanish. I am a simultaneous interpreter, so I was interpreting those, and and we were doing them from the EOC, and then decided, a lot of people still don't have internet and might not have cell service, so let's put it out in the radio. I knew some people at Blue Ridge Public Radio because there are some other Spanish radios, but I actually didn't have the contact. So I contacted someone from BPR and I let them know, hey, I know that you guys have been asked to broadcast the briefings in English. Could we also do the Spanish? And they said they would. So they would rotate the English briefings and then the Spanish briefings. We were doing two a day, which is a lot actually. But between those, one in the morning and then one in the afternoon, I was also going to Colaborativa La Milpa and Poder Emma because they have such a great reach in the community. And we're also going into community. I was also going over there, dropping any materials, any printed materials that we had ready, and or asked for if they had any needs, and as well as making sure that if they hadn't listened to the most current briefing, that then I would kind of give them like the main takeaways or highlights from those briefings. So we were also doing that from the county side. And it then, developed into, we got into some type of rhythm, and then we went to only one briefing per day and doing more communications online as things were starting to get reinstated. But I did do a message to the community. One of the first reels that I made were letting people know, please spread the word to your neighbors, to anyone who might not have the same luck as you know, finding the information online. And those were some of the things that we did from the county. I will say, I help with language accessibility, but we have also a PIO who's bilingual in my team. And then from the emergency, we requested a lot of other PIOs from outside of the county, from outside of the area, really. And they were able to help us as well. And as much as, you know, AI and ChatGPT have a long way to go, at least for Spanish, it has proven that machine learning has done great. So they were helping me put out the information because it was a lot. It was overwhelming. So they were putting out the information in both English and Spanish through ChatGPT. But when it came to the Facebook direct messages, then I would have them kind of have like a small message that they wrote, but then I would make sure that I would follow up because still machine translation, it just doesn't have the human touch.
Excellent points, and thank you so much for the amazing efforts that you did personally during that time. I want to also just briefly touch on what you were just mentioning, the tech tools. So often agencies want to find quick tech tools to use during emergencies. So just wanted to also get Omar's just briefly thoughts around this. So Omar, based on this experience and as a language justice worker, what would you like to add in terms of emergency messaging and the use of technology?
Yeah, we actually had a lot of volunteers come forward, people who just wanted to help in multiple ways. And I know a spreadsheet was created to help organize some of that. I imagine that spreadsheet was off Google, so just like a regular Microsoft. But it helped keep everything aligned and organized. It's so easy to be disorganized naturally in a situation like that. Um, but yeah, that was really instrumental, asking folks like what their name was, like how fluent they are, what industries they worked in. Um, we had some members who did relocate during the hurricane, and that ended up actually being really, really helpful to us. They had Wi-Fi, so that was super important. That was super helpful for us. They supported us with creating a flyer for the little market that we had opened in Ukrainian. They had a friend help them out with that. Um, and also, there was some support with Buncombe County press releases for Helene that we could not literally do because we had no Wi-Fi. And um, so, yeah, technology was super important. I will say with, some of these AIs, like DeepL, for example, it's one of the better ones. But even then, I'm finding that you do have to feed it a little bit more. Like it's hard to use it for like one word or like a flyer where you're just putting in like three words or something. I'm learning that I'm having to like feed it more. So, it could be good, but also that's something that I like to let clients know. Um, but yeah, we had to do what we could with little tech, point to things, just try our best. We have a lot of things, and when I say we, I mean our little ecosystem here. It's very normal for us to do everything in both languages, to have everything in both languages. But I know that folks don't always have the resources to do that. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think the important part that I heard sort of from both of you is the element of the human plus the AI tools to ensure the accuracy, to not just solely rely on that. Sounds like you all have bilingual connections in the community for languages even beyond Spanish, and that being really critical to not rely solely on AI or other machine translations for other languages. Thank you all. Absolutely. So now I'd like to talk a little bit with Laura and get her perspective, as the interim executive director of a Latinx community agency. I know, Laura, one of your key roles involves collaboration between agencies. What types of collaborations did you find helpful during the hurricane response?
So I'm gonna highlight collaborations at different levels, and I want to start talking on the collaborations at the local level. Thank you to the collaborations that Centro Unido has already with other community leaders like the Chamber of Commerce, the Emergency Services, the local community college. We were part of like the first couple of days of quickly organizing the EOC and where the county was going to start distributing the resources and how and supplies and how. So that's how we our team ended up that first Monday morning supporting at the distribution center because we knew we were needed there. Because here in McDowell, even though we are working with the city, in building the language accessibility, we're trying to expand that to countywide. But we're not still at a level like, for example, Buncombe, and I'm hopeful that we can get to that level one day. But what we realized when we were helping at the distribution center of the county is that our Latino community, a lot of them, they were not getting the supplies or they didn't know where to go. So same thing as Rocio was mentioning, some of our phones had signals, so we started doing lives because that's how we communicate with community. Just letting community know where the pods were, what were the hours, how they could get there to get resources. We helped translate flyers. But we knew that the communications maybe were not reaching everybody because not having communications, access to internet in a lot of areas. McDowell is a pretty rural county. So we know where our Latino community lives, and we know a lot of areas don't have good signal. So during those days that we were helping over there, we had to make a decision. And first, some of our staff members with other volunteers decided to just load their cars and go and door to door, go visit families and bring them supplies and bring them the information. Hey, if you need more, there's all these locations around the county where you can get more. But there was still a lot of barriers for our community to go to those locations, like one of them being language, others like not having transportation or fear, for example. I think other regions or other counties experience this as well, but there was presence of like Homeland Security cars and all that, who created a lot of fear, thinking that they were there, for other purposes when they were there just to support. But that's a barrier for our community to get access to supplies. So as soon as we recover power and light, we decided to open our own distribution center here at the office because we knew community were going to be here waiting for us. And that's what happened. The first day that we came here, we already had dozens of people waiting, confused, with a lot of fear, with a lot of distress, needing help, needing supplies. So we quickly started organizing here, and that's where the collaboration that we have with the church was helpful as well. The church has a big fellowship hall because we started like getting all the supplies in our office, but our office is really not that big. So with all the donations that we started to receive because of all the collaborations that we have across the state, our office started to being like, just collapse with all the different supplies really, really quick. So the church was like, hey, you guys can use the fellowship hall. Let's do it together. And you have access for it as long as we need to have access for supplies. So we started using the fellowship hall as a hub for the resources and the supplies. And that made a big difference. And it was a lot easier to organize everything. And we had more space and also space for the volunteers. We had such an amazing response of people just coming to help from other churches, from other parts of the county, even they were coming from other counties, surrounding counties where they were not as much as affected, like, even Hickory and other areas, they were coming and just helping. So that was really amazing. And then I want to highlight then the collaborations at the regional and state level. Quickly, leaders across the state started reaching out, not only to Centro Unido, but to other organizations in the region, and quickly saying, hey, what do you need? How can we help? How we can support? And I like what Carolina was saying, the perspective that we were getting locally compared to what they were seeing um, outside of the disaster area. It was shocking, but it felt that it made us feel that somebody else got our backs, that we weren't alone. And I know quickly they organized like a WhatsApp group where a lot of different organizations jumped in there, quickly like sharing resources. Hey, this resource is available. Hey, we're sending a trailer. Luckily, Centro Unido, because we were more towards east, we didn't lose communication like by road. Like I-40 was open, you could reach McDowell. So we became kind of like a hub at the beginning for resources that later were being sent to other parts of the region, like Asheville, like Silva, to other organizations that we knew were not as accessible. So we were just having trucks and volunteers driving to those areas, people who knew the roads, to make those supplies reach other areas that we knew didn't have as much access. And I want to highlight like connections that we built along the way with organizations such as They Want Relief, that they just really listening to our needs. And the last piece I want to highlight, I know I'm running out of time, but it's just also the relationships that we have with foundations, with our funders. That was super important because they made funds available really quick to us, because we knew a lot of the Latino Hispanic community were not going to be eligible for funds from FEMA because not having a social security number. So having access to those funds, private funds that were going to be helpful to support financially some families that we knew were not going to get help other way. And that's how we were able to start our disaster relief assistance program.
Wow. Thank you so much, Laura. So many incredible efforts and points and levels of collaboration and coordination that you mentioned. Just really shows the power of trust and working together on the local level really being essential. I also wanted just to add about the WhatsApp group that you mentioned, that to me one of the most um, amazing parts was, excuse me, how quickly that was put together. Just within 24 hours, there was a WhatsApp group started by Latinx leaders in Spanish. And then people started supporting each other just immediately in incredible ways. And that continues to be a channel through which folks have supported each other. Now, in different situations that we're in currently, to get out critical information in Spanish and that has community and culture, always at the forefront of that. So thank you for that. I also want to turn now to Carolina. As a former resident and employee in Buncombe County, you are already well connected to that community. But can you tell us just briefly what other connections you had in other parts of Western North Carolina that helped you in your state role to coordinate with those communities?
I always love going after Laura because she does such a great job in laying out the context of what was happening at a local level, at a state level, and then frankly also the impact of having national organizations and federal organizations also involved in trying to bring relief and information and resources to hyper local communities. And For context, I've worked and lived in Western North Carolina for over 30 years until recently moving to Raleigh. So I was doing a lot of work mostly in Henderson and Buncombe County. I grew up in Hendersonville and I worked professionally in Buncombe County. So that was just, I think, probably my comfort zone where people were calling on me to support, bring information into the area. Um, I think that, we created probably about 6 weeks in, if not less than that, because it started as a call and then we moved over to Zoom once folks were able to gain stable internet connection. But it was important for regional leaders to connect as well from various counties because there was an influx of external resources coming in. And to Laura's point, I mean, Kula definitely was geographically on the corridor of how resources were entering the region. 40 from Tennessee completely blocked, like there was nothing was going to come that way. It took, I think, a minute to have other ways of supporting the region to be open and viable. So they were a very important hub. And at the beginning, a lot of the Latinx organizations didn't have a warehouse, didn't have some of those relationships or spaces to really be able to store the high volume that we know the warehouse in La Milpa and the warehouse that Kula had became important concentrations of resources for the Latino community and also culturally tailored and appropriate resources, which was really important. Remember seeing on Instagram pretty quickly La Milpa, Kula putting out the list like we need beans, we need maseca. That was really important in a time of crisis to be able to spread the word and say like, no, it's not a one size fits all. We really need to understand what is happening on the ground. And absolutely, the kinds of resources that were coming in were there's a book that I really like that I recommend if you all have an opportunity of reading. It's called The Undocumented Americans, and it really lays out how resource distribution can be very different based on your immigration status. And I think that that's what we were experiencing. Yes, we're here to talk about language access, but there are cultural components, transportation, like Laura mentioned, trust, misinformation that also just adds so many layers of complication that if you don't have, during COVID, we had the community health workers, all of the people on this panel and beyond, all the people that we were connected with, they were the community health workers, the disaster case managers, really stepping in to be that bridge between all of those resources and all of that information. So we did these weekly Zoom meetings to bring in FEMA, to bring in grants, the American Red Cross, to help kind of orient and create a collective information that was specifically tailored for the Latino community. And as you see on the screen, you're sharing the Office of Health Equity designed town halls that targeted the entire region. We brought in both FEMA as one of the primary resources for information, but also like local communities like the United Way, Asheville Buncombe Asheville Buncombe Christian Ministries. That's an example of how we were trying to bridge that federal, state, and local context and resources that needed to be hopefully equitably distributed amongst vulnerable populations. We know that there was a lot of access challenges, not just for spoken languages, but also for individuals with disabilities. So really being able to work on those intersections and really try to help the different community members, farm workers were navigating this very differently, didn't have transportation, traditionally don't have transportation. They're brought into the region to do seasonal work, don't have kind of like that community connection. They don't have family here. So really understanding those nuances, and I think I've gone over time, but I really wanted to layer and add the complexity to this conversation of all the different subgroups of populations that needed assistance. And then especially with programs like DSNAP that were available to a large, to really anyone who was eligible, that we had 1 week to make sure folks applied, understood that this was available to everyone. And we saw, I mean, I know in Henderson County DSS, they saw a line down the road for people, a large majority of them Spanish speaking, that really needed the support. You had organizations like True Ridge, like Hola Carolina, bringing in volunteer interpreters to help with the case navigation, or the people in line understand what the process was going to look like. Of course, the caseworkers had to manage the applications, but even that, to really get the word out, and they had some amazing turnout, and that was really important to do thanks to the help of local radio, local reporters. Enlace Latino did some amazing coverage, which is also really important because the other thing is Western North Carolina is a media desert. So you don't really have mainstream information flooding the region in Spanish other than outside of the work that local organizations are doing, or like the Buncombe County communications team that does have bilingual support. So thinking about these layers and factors as we continue to plan for future emergencies and crises, I think will be really important as we understand those lessons learned.
That's fantastic. So many good points there as well, Carolina. And I appreciate how you talked about additional languages, and would also add that I was fortunate to join in and listen during some of those Zoom meetings, and so appreciate how responsive you were at the state level to requests, at least taking that to the state to try to say, this is what I'm hearing, and follow back up with community members. So now turning to Rocio again, just briefly, I know you also had mentioned languages other than Spanish. You mentioned Ukrainian and Russian. Anything you would like to add in terms of local government's capacity to serve languages other than English and Spanish, like early in the response?
So one thing that was a rude awakening was how we do have an in-house interpreter team at the Health and Human Services, but because we all live in this area, our staff was actually highly impacted, and then now we had no access to them. And then also, as we heard from Omar, we had no access to our local contractors, like Cenzontle. We hire them a lot, and they didn't have. They were also highly impacted. They didn't have internet just like everybody else around here. So that was something that from now on, I think we need to think about having other contractors outside of the region, or maybe even outside of the country, just in case anything like this happens again. Just having that, in mind for next disasters, because it's not if it happens, but when it happens again.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. And it's something we don't often think about because we're just trying to meet our day-to-day needs, but expanding our networks and having backup plans beyond just the hyper local, which is fabulous, but people may not be able to work, or there may be, as you also mentioned, a lack of Wi-Fi or different situations where you need help from folks in other areas to support you until you are connected again. So again, many thanks, and great points in that area. So now turning to another type of agency capacity, Omar, you also touched, some on the Cenzontle Language Justice Cooperative before. Can you explain a little bit more about, you mentioned sort of the hub where you are. Can you talk about where your agency is located and who else works in that space?
Yeah, hi. I had to switch over to my phone. I hope y'all can hear me. Yeah, we're Cenzontle. We're Language Justice Cooperative. We're located in Asheville, North Carolina. We are women-owned, all Latinx, majority immigrant, queer, and we do language justice work. So we do simultaneous interpretation, we do translations, we do capacity. Here in where we're located, we're part of a local ecosystem of other organizations and co-ops who do various types of work. We have a child keeping co-op that are essential to parents who want to attend our meetings. We have Poderema. They do great work with fighting gentrification. We have Milpa, who was they do a lot of support with the local community with anything they may need. They connect people with resources. Um, but yeah, it's a great little big, I should say, ecosystem here that we have in Nashville, and it always feels good to be a part of this.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think part of what makes your location so special is, you are there in the heart of the community, and people who work there are part of the community, many of them, and everyone brings their own skills, to share together, and you have this, pretty new, relatively new space that has, a lot of uh, space for people to congregate and come together and support each other, and eat together. And so, I just have been so impressed with that, mutual aid and cooperative um, uh, model that, really shined, I think, in this circumstance in terms of being there for community and supporting each other in so many different ways. Um, so, I wonder if, you know, you want to speak also a little bit, Omar, on how the hurricane affected specifically Centzontle's language services work. And then also sort of larger, how did the Collaborativa network and your language skills help to support your agency's response to the hurricane?
Yeah, we immediately post on social media so clients can know what's going on. We had events that day, the following days, and some of them are local, but some of them aren't. Some of our clients are national. So it was important that they know, and some of them were finding out through us what had occurred. And I think I um, really understood what solidarity was. We are in connection with other co-ops, other language justice people who do um, the work that we do as well, and they just reached out and were like, "How can I help? Can I take some of your work?" In solidarity, of course, and that was really, really great. And yeah, trying to get them basically essentially coordinating like an orientation and a client introduction, all over like spotty Wi-Fi, and just like not even an hour to do it in. So it was great. But here with so we were able to get a grant from I believe La Milpa, who we lost, some income, just like other organizations. We lost income during those days that we were not able to come through or clients had to cancel. And we do have on our policy, we do have a cancellation policy, but we do have on there that we would not charge for weather. So that's something that kind of made us think about the future and what we can do, because it is an act of God, and but we also would like to rely on some of that income. So yeah, we were able to get a grant from Amipa, and to say that was um it's an understatement to say how like helpful and that was so wonderful to be a part of this. I It made me sad to see all these local businesses and restaurants that just like a few days into it, they were already like posting GoFundMe's for, it wasn't even the restaurant, but it was to pay the workers. And it did make me really, really feel fortunate to be a part of this. And maybe to consider, what we could do in the future for maybe having like a little emergency fund. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Great. Great ideas and kind of takeaways on what some future things to be thinking about as well. Thank you, Omar.